Support for Headline Humboldt is made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors took a big step in the long-running process of developing a regional climate action plan this week. A draft has been accepted by the board, and now the real work begins. Also, we talk with our favorite local political guru and attorney Eric Kirk about the upcoming election and all the somewhat confusing ballot measures and initiatives that are up for your consideration. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. So my story goes something like this. After the 2016 election, when Republican Donald Trump managed to eke out a slim electoral victory over Democrat Hillary Clinton, I was utterly flabbergasted. I careened into a state of frantic despair. The cable news shows ran in my house from early in the morning until late at night. It got so bad I dreamt about Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, heard their monologues in bed as I tried to count sheep, and Donald Trump became a kind of political boogeyman that set up camp under my bed, giving hateful speeches in a whisper meant to keep me rattled. It worked. I got sick with it. For 4 years, I rode this bull through the wreckage of a once well-rounded social life, keen to pop off at any passers-by who supported Trump or excused his bad behavior, because I told myself this is a fight for what's right. Then COVID hit. Setting aside the ridiculous way Trump handled the pandemic, getting suddenly cut loose from the rest of society and then falling ill somehow broke the fever. I came out of the isolation still concerned for my country, but way less agitated. What comes will come, but reacting to the political fates with a snarl and a raised middle finger will only exacerbate and further divide the country. I've made myself keep politics in perspective and keep my opinions from building walls. The balance I've come to is this. I follow the news, but not obsessively. I check in, learn the important things, then check out. For the most part, I got off social media. I'm on only as much as my job requires, no more, and I won't argue or engage with those I passionately disagree with. Most are regular folks like you and me trying to make sense of the world, that or they're bots, strictly there to get everyone mad. How's that worth all the rage and distress? It isn't. That being said, politics still matter. The trick is to vote and to take actions without taking it to extremes. Joining us in a few moments is attorney and political analyst Eric Kirk. But first, the news. After years of development, loads of public comment, and an often contentious process, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors this week accepted the county's Regional Climate Action Plan from staff. The plan lays out the actions and policies the county will take in order to lower emissions and contribute to the statewide effort to combat climate change. Those actions will include addressing emissions from vehicle travel, electricity use, natural gas consumption, and other local sources. It also outlines more than 24 measures related to carbon-free energy, building energy use, and transportation, waste, and water, wastewater, and carbon sequestration. Tom Wheeler from EPIC said in a recent episode of the Eco News Report that this version of the plan tries to address concerns from rural residents who feel their way of life might be threatened. The plan's emissions reduction goals align with California's state target of reducing emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. Now that the draft plan has been accepted by the board, a whole new process of review and public comment will commence around the document's environmental impact report, which will come back before the Planning Commission and the board. County Planning Director John Ford explains.
As we move forward, we will take and use this. This will be the project description within the EIR. And then we'll be working with Rincon to explore some of the comments that have been made. We're trying to set up a meeting, frankly, for Thursday morning to address some of that. And then to really understand how does it fit in with the overall framework of what's been proposed. Does it help? And if it does, we'll continue to massage that. We're not planning on making huge changes to this without it going through the EIR process and probably responding to comments that are made on the EIR on the draft through the public review process of the EIR. It's normal for a project to have modifications made going into the adoption process where the final EIR identifies how better to respond to certain comments. And so We're getting a little bit of a head start on that right now with some of the comments that have been made. What we plan to do is to really be able to respond to the public comments, respond to those formally, and identify why it's a good or a bad idea. And if it's a good idea, incorporate that into the draft. If it's not something that we would necessarily support, we would be bringing both a modified draft back and the comments that have been made for consideration of the board, whether or not you want to add those or not. So everything that's been commented on, everything that's been changed will be presented to the board for your consideration, with both changes that have been made and changes that have been requested but not made.
Every place needs an anthem, the song that makes you kind of weepy, kind of sad, kind of proud, and kind of happy, all at the same time. Local farmer Brett McFarland may have just dropped Humboldt County's own. McFarland recently released the video behind his original tune, named Humboldt, which was made with the help of local filmmaker Matt St. Charles, and both are ridiculously good. Cameos abound, as well as gratuitously beautiful nature shots and drone footage. Here's a sample for your listening and viewing pleasure.
This home with my own two hands, help from my friends and trees from the land, food and shelter the best I can. This right here is where I make my stand, 'cause we still got butchers and we still got mills, got a whole lot of folks with a whole lot of skills. If you ever need help, ever need a favor, well around here you still call on your neighbor. That's how we do it in Humboldt. Yeah, we do it in Humboldt. How we do it in Humboldt. Well, we got trees like you ain't ever seen, clear blue water straight out of a dream, and you don't have to go and look too far to find yourself a shooting star. You can be a weirdo, you can be a freak, you can be straight-laced 7 days a week, 'cause we got guts and we got pride, we got what matters on the inside.
I mean, I love it. I'm a weirdo, so I feel sung to by that song. We'll be right back with attorney Eric Kirk after this.
It's almost here. KEET's travel auction featuring unforgettable destinations like Italy, Paris, and Scotland. Picture yourself exploring these dream locations with 4-star accommodations and your own personal travel specialist to handle every detail. With 3 years to take your trip, you can bid with confidence and support KEET's community programs. Visit keet.org/travel and find out how to register.
Life is complicated enough. Why worry about what to do with your extra car? Skip the costs of maintaining it, storing it, insuring it, or renewing registration. Car repairs? Forget about it. Here's one easy solution to your car problem. Donate it to our station. It's fast, free, tax deductible, and if you donate, you're going to feel incredible knowing you're supporting quality programming. Interested? Just call this toll-free number or donate online. Thank you.
Joining us now in studio is Eric Kirk, a local political commentator and lawyer who has long been heralded for his keen local analysis. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry.
So there's a lot to get to today. People are kind of taking a look at their election guides, trying to figure out what to vote for and what not. But the most important issue right off the top, state propositions. There's ones in single digits and there's ones in the 30s. Why? Why don't they just go in numerical order?
So the single-digit propositions are reserved for two things: either bond issues, because they have to be approved by a special election, 2/3 majority. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
And actually, on statewide, they don't necessarily. But and then the others are the constitutional amendments, which we have several of.
Okay.
Coming up in this one.
So
then
special
everything
class
else gets put up in the 30s and above.
Okay. Now, so how do they start that number, I wonder? Like, they start with 32? Is there just an arbitrary?
I'm not sure. I think they go until they get a certain height, and then they come back at a certain point. I don't know what the rules are. I don't know if it's 100, so they can avoid that. I mean, we did that before the state got ridiculous and was going up to 400 and the rest. But I think it goes back, and I think it starts with 30 or 31.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so looking at the propositions, we have Prop 2, which, like you said, is a bond issue, and similarly, Prop 4 is a bond issue.
Yeah.
One is about building schools, that's Prop 2, and Prop 4 is about responding to climate change. What do people need to know?
I mean, bonds are so that we can finance building things, and so that we don't have to pay it all at once out of the general fund. It's what allows us, it's like a loan that anybody takes out, a business loan or anything else.
Yeah, it's basically financing for the state, right?
Right, and it is how we get things built. We generally don't build things out of the general fund. So they wanted they wanted to have special ballots for that each time. And
so basically the balance for voters is, do you think what they're building is worth it? I mean, that's the
is worth it. There is objection to the amount of bonded indebtedness that we have, and we can discuss whether it's getting too big or too small, but that is the debate. It's not, generally speaking, not whether it's worth it. It's just whether we can afford it.
Yeah.
And those are the arguments back and forth.
Okay, and then we have Prop 3, which was sort of addressed at Proposition 8 from back in the day, the same-sex ban that we had in California, right? But so Prop 3 is just affirming the right of same-sex couples to marry?
In Proposition 8, we passed a constitutional amendment that says that a marriage is only between a man and a woman. That would be erased, and it would be replaced by universal marriage or marriage equality.
Okay.
The reason for this is that there is some fear based on Justice Clarence Thomas' remarks after they overturned Roe v. Wade, talking about turning it back to the states. This is the type of thing that should be decided by the states. So in case that happens, we want to have our state ready.
Yeah, and so we clean out any of the stuff that may hang up things like same-sex marriage or anything else.
That's right.
Out of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have Proposition 5, which is lower voter approval requirements for local housing and infrastructure. It would be lowered to 55%?
From 2/3 to 55%. The 2/3 came from Prop 13 and the tax rebellions of the 1970s. And it just makes it really hard to pass anything. 55% is considered a landslide in any other context. So it's not too easy, but it's obtainable. I can't remember the percentage, but it's high of bond measures that fail because people just don't want to pay it, understandably. Who wants to pay it if you don't have to?
But with something like housing and the state being in the situation it is, with housing costs skyrocketing, this is probably seen as a way to help address that, right?
It is, and it's and that, again, it's but this is a local. This is for local bonds right now. That's the issue right now. It's 2/3. I think the state actually went back to 50% some years
so
ago.
the state has a lower bar than local.
That's right, yeah.
Isn't that typical? Okay, and then limited forced labor in state prisons. This is basically saying that the state is no longer allowed to run chain gangs.
Basically ends chain gangs, and interesting enough, Alabama has already passed this measure.
So we're behind Alabama right now.
We're behind Alabama right now. Basically, I mean, people complain, well, allows them to be lazy, but basically you have to incentivize it. You either pay them or offer them something else. They can volunteer, but they can't be penalized or punished for not working.
Yeah, so if they want to sit around, they can. It's not something that they're going to be punished for.
That's right.
Okay, so moving up now to the propositions in the 30s. One that I know is popular with my kids right now, Prop 32, raised the state minimum wage to $18. So what do you understand? There's a stepped process here. It's not all at once. What's going on?
It's phased. It would go up to $17 first and then $18. Small businesses are a year behind. And then thereafter, it would be based on cost of living adjustments, no more than 3.5%. And if there wasn't a cost of living, there wouldn't be increase. There wouldn't be any adjustment.
There's a little bit extra for fast food workers. Is that right, or is that?
No. That was we passed that already for fast food workers. I don't know why they get special and we don't have teachers' aides.
Well, a lot of people are working hard. It's not just fast food
workers. It's true, but teachers' aides are working hard.
That's what
too.
I mean. Yeah, they're all working hard.
Yeah.
So why should they get that special treatment?
Yeah.
And they get free burgers, right? I mean, what else do they need?
Well,
My son, I can say that because my son works at In-N-Out.
they tend to be kids that it's their first job. That's what it's set up for. But anyway.
Okay, so then Prop 33, talking about the housing crunch, this would allow local governments to impose rent controls, which a lot of people freak out about and say, well, that could, crater the property market and everything else. What's this initiative telling us?
Listen, I'm a landlord and I support some rent control. Not all rent control. Some rent control measures are written badly. This isn't a rent control measure. It simply would allow local jurisdictions to enact rent control if they want. Costa-Hawkins was a bill that passed in the 1990s that basically says that we've got statewide rent control, that's good enough. You've got your rent control on the books, but no more rent control of a significant nature of certain types. And this basically turns the power back to the local municipalities. Now the argument is, well, you look at some places like Los Angeles, it's crazy, but that's on the local. That we don't have to have the state, at least the argument between it, we don't have to have the state babysitting local jurisdictions to make sure that they're passing the right stuff.
Yeah, and it's like the state too often, I think, puts out a sort of a cookie cutter approach to things and then ties the hands of local municipalities who need a lot of freedom sometimes to be able to navigate difficult issues and whatever problems arise. So.
This also, by the way, the Costa-Hawkins prohibits any rent control whatsoever of single family housing or condos or apartments built after 1995, and that's a lot of stuff that's exempted.
Yeah, exactly. And the further we get away from it, the more it'll be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So Prop 34 requires certain providers to use prescription drug revenue for patients. This seems like people would want to vote for this, but then you have an interesting issue with it.
It sounds good, and they've to sweeten the deal, they've put in allowing Medi-Cal even more opportunity to negotiate lower drug prices. That's something the legislature should do. It shouldn't have to be slipped into an amendment like this. They call this the revenge initiative because there are landlord lobbies who are very upset with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It requires that if you have over 100 million that you're dedicating it to an organization spending that much, that you need to spend 98% of it on health care, right? Makes sense, except that it only applies to one organization, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which among other things is partly responsible for Proposition 33. It gets involved, they've decided that AIDS people would benefit from affordable housing. And so they've taken that up as an issue. So basically this would
It's gotten way more political than it was originally intended. And
right. But so this would basically pull the AIDS Healthcare Foundation out of the mix in terms of housing controversies. They put a lot of money into it. I don't agree with everything the AIDS Healthcare Foundation does, but there should not be a measure that is passed simply to take revenge on a single organization. That's ridiculous. There's to everybody's knowledge, there's no other organization this would apply to.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's bizarre.
I wonder how they got the signatures for that kind of thing, but I guess just...
because it sounds good.
It sounds good, yeah. And then Prop 35, make a permanent a tax on managed healthcare plans, which might discourage some people from taking Medicare. Is that what I heard?
No, this would, we already have a special tax that's taken from certain plans that is funding Medi-Cal right now. It was a temporary, this would make it permanent. But part of the criticism of it coming even from progressives who would otherwise say, yeah, we definitely want to support Medi-Cal, is that a good portion of the money would go to paying healthcare providers, and they feel like it should be going to expanding benefits and other projects of Medi-Cal. This is not this is not doctors and people trying to be greedy. Right now in Humboldt County, it's hard to find a Medi-Cal accepting facility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we were talking about this before the show, dentists and anybody who accepts Medi-Cal, they either have to become kind of like chop shops, some of the dentists, where they deal with a lot of patients to make their bottom line, to meet their bottom line, or they don't accept them at all. And so you have to travel down to Oroville or anywhere else to get medical care, and this might help local providers accept Medi-Cal? Is that basically the bottom line?
It would provide a little bit more of an incentive, or at least a little bit less of a disincentive. I know healthcare providers who want to do Medi-Cal, they just can't afford it, and this would at least make it, you know, a little bit more competitive. To be able to get some providers involved.
Yeah, that's important, folks. I think Prop 35 is a sleeper. Don't sleep on 35. So Prop 36, now this is the one we've had the sheriff on the show and we've talked about it. Now one of the things that the sheriff pitched was that it would help eliminate or reduce sort of stacked shoplifting crimes like at Walmart, where they've now, it's basically an armed camp when you go in there because there's so many things that are put away. And then also it would give them leverage to push people into treatment when they have substance use disorder. What say you to that?
I mean, it also partly basically repeals Proposition 47.
Which was the progressive sort of answer to overpopulation in prisons. Right?
And in response to the Supreme Court order that we had to lower our prison population by 30%. In the 1980s, we passed so many bond issues building more and more and more prison. It's became an industry here. We exceeded, as California, if it was its own country, exceeded the Soviet Union and South Africa, then apartheid, for percentage of people behind bars. This was intended to do this. Felonizing even serial, I think there's just got to be alternatives to that. And people are saying, well, I look on YouTube and I see all these smash and grab things. It doesn't address that. Smash and grab, if you're caught, is a serious crime and you will be seriously penalized. And this doesn't change anything about that. But will it deter people who shoplift habitually? I don't know. I don't know if it was working before that, but to felonize serial shoplifting seems excessive to me. But you know, I'm a bleeding heart. You know, kind of.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I mean, people who are shoplifting are often, I mean, the target here in 36 are people who are drug abusers and drug addicts, and they're going out to fund their addiction. And I don't know that penalties are going to stop them from doing that, honestly.
I don't know either, or people who just have a mental klepto condition. I don't know. I guess we'll find out one way or another, because I think it'll probably pass, but we'll see.
That's Prop 36, and so that's it for the statewide initiatives. Okay, so then we move on to the local. There's only a couple county-wide ones. Or first off, let's start with Measure F, of course. Measure F is the Eureka. It would change regulations on the city's use of 21 city-owned public parking lots in the former Jacobs Middle School site owned by Eureka City Schools. It was placed on the ballot by a petition signed by the requisite number of voters, and it lists the parking lots. But what's really at use here with the Measure F?
First of all, this is restoking the old culture wars locally.
Yes.
I mean, you look at the people who support it. Of course, Arkley supports it, but you know, you look at Frank Yeager and Marion Brady, and then opposing it are Peter LaValle, and all the same players we've seen. Suspects.
Exactly right.
And what this is about is there are a number of currently parking lots in what they're calling downtown that are slated for affordable housing. And they want to say that you can't do that, or you have to provide parking
in lieu of, like you have to. That number of spots needs to be recreated somewhere else. Right?
That's right. Yeah. And they say it's for the downtown, but I sort of consider Old Town to be downtown more than this. These parking lots kind of circle the courthouse. I personally love that one on G and 3rd. I use it all the time when I'm in trial. You know, and but if it's going to go to housing that is for people where it's an infill type of development, where people who don't have cars can walk and get food and other services.
And which generally is known to improve a neighborhood. I mean, it reduces crime and stuff because people are settled there and coming and going more often, so there's less, There
are also some issues in that there are some state laws that it might break.
And some funding that the city might lose if this gets passed. So there's a lot to consider here. And oddly, Arkley bought the parking lot in front of City Hall and now won't let anyone park there as like sort of a ransom or something. I don't know exactly what.
I don't know. It's but you know, and then there's a second prong to this, because that's why they can call it the housing initiative, is they want to dedicate the Jacobs site, the school site. Anybody who's had soccer kids has been there. It's you know, it's a school building that's been sitting there not unused for years. It's dangerous. Nobody can go in it, and they've been talking about what to do about this thing housing for years,
Yeah.
and no objection to housing there, but the advantage of housing in Old Town or near the courthouse as opposed to there is it's a long walk to Winco from
Yeah.
there. You know, so if
Yeah.
you don't have a car, it's going to be difficult. But I have no objection to using that for housing or any other venture that is there. I just don't think it should be dictated on a culture war.
As a target like that. And then
Yeah.
also CHP is negotiating with the district
That's right.
over that, which I mean is sort of out of the county's hands anyway, unless they change the rules, which who knows what that would result in. So
and that's the other thing is you can't force a school district to do that. This measure probably is unenforceable with regard to that portion of it.
yeah. So we've only got 3 minutes left. We knew this
Okay.
was going to go fast. But Measure O, I think, is another important one that we need to talk about. It's countywide, and it would continue the sales tax for Humboldt County, right?
Yes, it's
There it is.
and I don't like sales taxes. I think they're regressive. They affect poor people more than others, and I don't think sales tax should be above 5%. But we need this stuff desperately. Where the county is short, and so you know so you got to make that decision. But it would bring the total sales tax in some local jurisdictions up to like 9.5%.
Yeah, and
That's
it's a 1% transaction and use tax.
Yeah.
And let's see here, it would on any retail for the sale of tangible personal property and a tax on consumption and use of property purchased for which a transaction was not. That doesn't make any sense. So,
Well,
you know.
Anyway, it's a sales tax for money that we do need. In fact,
Yeah, and the
need.
county does desperately need it, and
Yes.
but it is raising the sales tax up to some pretty high rates in some of the counties.
almost to
outlying areas.
10%, and that's a harsh
Yeah.
tax.
So, I mean, real quick, we have two races that I wanted to touch on before we go.
Sure.
Senate. Who's going to win California Senate?
I mean, I loved Steve Garvey as a kid as part of the infield. I think I'd rather have Willie McCovey as governor. The Giants. I was a Giants fan.
Yeah.
But it's Adam Schiff. I think pretty much has
it in the bag.
Has it in the bag.
Then the presidential race. You were saying before the show that you absolutely have no idea where that's going to go. And
Intellectually, I don't. Based on the polls, based on you get early turnout. You try to decipher it, but it never actually pans out. One side can get out its early votes, but then the other side makes it up. We don't have Trump telling people to wait until Election Day this time, so there's going to be a lot more Republican early voters.
which could be good. Right?
But I just don't know. I'll quote James Carville and Michael Moore. It feels like Harris is going to win, but to others it doesn't. There's a narrative now about Harris losing ground in the polls, except that you look at them and she's not. She actually picked up on a TIPP poll 4 points.
Yeah.
The thing I would look at though is the New York Times Siena poll, which is Gold Star, had Harris's support with Republicans double between September and October.
Okay, well maybe that's our prognosis.
Who knows?
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And folks at home, join us on election night. We'll be here for regular updates starting at around 7:55 or so, but we'll have to double check that time and we'll let you know next week. But please join us on election night. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Remember to check out our podcast, Neon Galactic, to challenge all your preconceived notions about reality and the planet Earth. That's at youtube.com/@neongalactic. Stay tuned, stay informed.